Season 3, Episode 7 of The Mandalorian, The Spies, is one of my favorite episodes of this show. It has a lot of what I really like about the show and things that I think the show does really well, though it does also have a few examples of areas where I think the show will often suffer or be held back. So we'll talk about all of those going through the section, or going through the episode in three sections. We'll start off with the Imperial Shadow Council, then we'll go into the journey to the Great Forge, and we'll finish off with the battle within Gideon's base. So first off, the Shadow Council, no complaints about the scene. I really loved almost everything they did here. It was great seeing Gilad Pellaeon in live action. I think they really nailed him both visually and as a character. We got the simping for Thrawn. We had a few details on his uniform. But one of the details that I did like in this scene with all of the different warlords is that we kind of saw a few different takes on their outfits. We saw them starting to personalize their outfits for their own, sometimes more grandiose than others' purposes. Gideon, in particular, he had his Dark Trooper outfit that probably wouldn't have been allowed under the Empire. Some other ones were wearing like casual coats and personal modifications. Even Pellaeon seemed to be modified a little bit, but it was pretty reminiscent of some of what you'd see in Legends, where a lot of the warlords would even make up some of their own ranks in certain situations. So I like that as a way to show that they're really not as unified and standardized as they once were. But I'm sure that that plot line will either become more important in the finale, where I think we'll probably get hints of it, but I don't think it's going to be a big part of the finale. But we're definitely going to be getting to more of that in Ahsoka and Dave Filoni's movie. So we'll leave that mostly aside for now. I just wanted to say I really did enjoy that section of the episode. Uh, but that takes us to the middle part, which is all the Mandalorians getting together, all the way through till their journey to the Great Forge. And I did like how they handled some of the Mandalorian relationships there. Uh, the the fight between Axe and Paz over their divergent ideas of what the game should even be, highlighting some of Bo-Katan's worries about the Mandalorians being kind of just a powder keg waiting to explode. Uh, and I think it fits with what we know of Paz, where we see that Paz does have a short fuse. He has a very clear idea of what's supposed to be right. And while he has kind of come around on Din and Bo Katan over the last few episodes, a lot of that comes from the fact that they did save Ragnar, even though Din kind of did that in episode one, and Paz didn't give much of a care for that. But I think that's another example of something that I do think the show kind of struggles with sometimes, is deciding which things are supposed to just be a thing that happens for one reason or another, and which things are supposed to contribute to something else specific later. And I'll give another example of what I'm talking about there. So on top of just whether the attack on Ragnar the first or second time was more important, I guess the second time was more impactful because he did get taken away. But you'd think there would have still been some gratitude for Din coming in and saving them, saving Ragnar from the first animal attack. But in the conversation with Din and Bo-Katan, where Din is saying that he would follow Bo-Katan regardless. He doesn't care about the Darksaber. I wish they'd highlighted more that it was Din that doesn't care about the Darksaber, not saying that the Children of the Watch don't care about the Darksaber. Because I don't think anything we've seen so far has indicated uh, that the value placed on the Darksaber doesn't also apply to the Children of the Watch. Within the context of The Mandalorian, the people used to explain the Darksaber were the Children of the Watch. We've only got three Children of the Watch characters in Din, the Armor, and Paz Vizsla. Like there's Ragnar and there's like the other background ones, but in terms of actual speaking roles or anyone who's gotten any level of development, we have those three. So anything we know about those about the Children of the Watch comes from those three. And for one thing, even just in this episode, there was the question from the survivors of whether the armor was from Death Watch and whether the Children of the Watch were from Death Watch. And she doesn't give a straight answer to that. She just says that Death Watch is gone. But I think the implication there is supposed to be that they were, and it does seem like all the evidence points to that. Like Paz Vizsla, his clan was pretty heavily involved in that because of Pre Vizsla, and even a lot of the surviving Mandalorians in general would probably have come from Death Watch anyways. I don't think that's a thing that's exclusive to them, but it would point towards the Darksaber being important. Uh, but the way that it's explained in the book of Boba Fett, we have Din bringing the Darksaber to the armor and Paz Vizsla on Glavis, and the armor asks Din if he knows what it is. And Din is the one who tells the armor in return, uh, from what he's aware, if anyone has the Darksaber, then they can claim to rule. they're able to claim that they're the ruler of Mandalore. It doesn't mean everyone listens to them, and we know that the armor and Paz didn't immediately like declare fealty to him, but neither did Axe Wolves and the rest of the Night Owls, even though they were explicitly looking for that from Bo-Katan. Uh, so I don't think there's anything in that scene that separates what the armorer tells Din about the lore behind the Darksaber from their own personal beliefs, especially when the armorer kind of uses Bo-Katan's illegitimate gaining of the Darksaber by being given it by Sabine as an example of how the Mandalorians have kind of fallen away from their reign and how Bo-Katan was cursed to begin with. So I really don't think, with the limited interactions we've seen, that it really supports Din's claim that his people don't care about it. And I think with what we've seen from Din personally, he's been the one that's been so open to having these different ideas of what it means to be Mandalorian, how they're all supposed to relate to one another. Like we've seen this both with Boba Fett, and we've seen it with his initial introduction to Bo-Katan and the Night Owls. And that's kind of the impetus for all of them getting together in the first place. So I think the show would do better to just highlight that element, that it's Din that doesn't care, not trying to project it onto the other characters in a way that we don't really see. Because I don't think I did a shorter video about this, and I got some pushback saying like, "Oh, this was just not a thing that Din was taught." But Din is aware of it, and Din is the one who tells the armor in return, like, "Yes, I'm aware that this can allow you to claim to become Mandalore, to rule Mandalore." So it's not a thing that's just a gap in his education. It's not a thing that the armor is placing no credence on or saying is just a thing that other people believe. And then Paz Vizsla comes in and tries to take it from Din. There is that family connection with the Vizslas, and that he has that additional layer of connection to the Darksaber. But I think the way the story is structured, you're supposed to understand that Paz sees this all as Paz isn't seeing this differently. It's just an added layer on top of what the armor and Din have already been talking about. So with the fact that Din saw the other Mandalorians in season 2 and basically told everyone in the world that they're not Mandalorian because they weren't wearing their helmets, but then he comes around on Bo-Katan. He doesn't shun them in the way that some other members of the covert might have earlier. Same thing with Boba Fett, where at first he is hesitant to give him the armor, but then Boba Fett clears up that the armor came from his dad, and Din is perfectly on board with all of that. He doesn't even have that negative reaction to Cobb Vanth. He's willing to hear out Cobb Vanth's reasons for wearing the armor and doesn't just like shoot him on the spot, something that a few other Mandalorians might have done. So I'm not saying Cobb is a Mandalorian, but Din has been a lot more open-minded and a lot more willing to look at their traditions and see which elements of them are most important to him. And I think that's something the Mandalorians should be valuing a bit more. And I think it does cheapen it a little in my mind to have had Din claim that this is a thing that's universal to his group. And I don't think this is a thing that Din is just saying because he is trying to lie to Bo-Katan. I don't think Din is going to sugarcoat that kind of thing, and I think that would go against his personal ethics to lie in that moment. But yeah, that's just an example. I know I talked about that for a long time, but just an example of the kind of thing where it feels like the Mandalorian has a disconnect between some of what it executes in specifics versus what it's trying to tell overall, and where certain details get kind of left behind if they don't help in the specific moment. With a show that has such little dialogue and so few conversations between between characters that aren't just here I did this, now I did this, I think having that be at odds with each other in certain situations is it's not ideal. That I'll leave it at that for now. And I don't think that's the kind of thing where I'm just overreacting for. And I'm not saying that the show sucks because of it or anything, but I don't think it's the kind of specific thing they're going to address in the future and say why that discrepancy would exist. But anyways, the other than that, like I did really like how they started bringing together the Mandalorians. They did set up with Bo-Katan that she was worried about it becoming more of a powder keg situation. They're just waiting for something to blow it all apart. So there's still a lot of work, even though the Mandalorians are working together now. There's a lot of work to try to reconcile these groups and to adapt them into a kind of unified force. We're getting a lot of them working together, and that certainly helps in building the camaraderie. But that doesn't remove the underlying differences that they're going to have to address about what it means to be Mandalorian and what they are or aren't willing to accept from each other in the future. So I'm glad that the show isn't just papering that over. But that gets us to the final part of the episode, the fight within the base, which I think is like classic, fantastic Mandalorian action. And I do want to just highlight as well the fleet shots as well, which were just absolutely gorgeous. So I'm looking forward to the presumptive space battle we'll get in the finale. Because if it looks anything like those fleet gathering and travel shots, it should just look fantastic. Uh, but yeah, so the rest of the battle, we had Gideon show back up and reveal that he's alive, or has been probably on Mandalore the whole time. So the we're starting to get some more payoff for what he's doing with the cloning. He says he's trying to bring together the best elements of the Mandalorians, the clones, or the cloners rather, and the Jedi. And we also see something that I think is an example of his hubris, where Pershing has highlighted before that the uh, previous attempts to have the original Dark Troopers with as kind of just an armor suit with an organic being inside it, the organic being was holding it back. But now we have Gideon saying he's made the real improvement, which is putting himself in the armor. And I think this is meant to be an example of his hubris. And we've also set up something interesting, I think, with Din getting captured, where I think we're going to get the traditional Pedro Pascal head reveal at the end of the season with the helmet being forcibly removed. And my suspicion is that that's being used to set up a situation where his helmet gets removed, and then the armor, and I guess not Paz anymore, but the covert has to decide whether they still accept him as a Mandalorian after all he's done, or if they're going to hold that rule to be more important and shun him again. And I do wish there was a bit more agency involved in both Din and Bo-Katan removing their helmets, but but I think as long as that choice is addressed, I think that's going in a good direction. But I'm not afraid that Din is going to die. I know that's a common theory, but I feel like there's a few reasons that he wouldn't. I talked about this with Eckhart's Ladder on TapCap as well, but I think they wouldn't have had the original plan to not have Grogu back if Din was going to die this season. When they're so insistent on that being the core dynamic of the show still, I don't think they're planning to kill off Din anytime soon. But that's just one of a few reasons. So I don't want to get into too many bits of speculation for the final episode. Overall, I did really love the episode, even though I spent half of this review talking about a very specific complaint that I have with some of what the Mandalorian does. Seems like we're setting up for a really fun battle in the finale. Let me know in the comments whether you think there's going to be any big cameos. In my opinion, the big candidates are Boba Fett, Sabine, and Fenn Rau, actually. My money's actually on Fenn Rau, but we'll see what happens. Thank you so much for watching. We will be doing a live reaction, myself and Eckhart's Ladder, as soon as the episode's out, Wednesday morning or Tuesday night, whichever you want to call it, at about 3 a.m. Eastern. We're going to get together a bit sooner, talk about some speculation, some theories, and I might even do a theory video just going over some of my wilder speculation just for a fun time before the episode comes out as well. But thanks again for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the coverage of the season so far as we approach the final episode. Hope to see you next time. Bye, everyone.